Hello, everybody, and welcome to our After Church Tea Time. Today, we're looking at the sermon by Kanisha on the power of reparenting yourself on your twin flame journey. But before we begin, I'd like to ask my fellow unionists to please introduce themselves.
Hey, my name is Nadia Begum.
And hi, I'm Carmen.
And I'm Granville, and we are happy to be sharing our insights and takeaways from the sermon. And we also invite you to please share your insights and any gems that you found in Kanisha's sermon today. So I'm going to ask the team to start off with what they felt was probably their biggest takeaway, and we'll move along from there.
Yeah, maybe I can start. For me, the biggest takeaway was like seeing that we have the power to change the past in the now, in the present moment, and to not be resentful for what happened to us, but to see it as an opportunity to take responsibility in the now. So I liked the way Kanisha put it in the sermon, was like, most people they resent their childhood and their parents for not taking good care of them or stuff like that. And when we are in the present moment, it still kind of haunts us what happened to us in the childhood, and everything is, we are being deeply impacted by our childhood in the now, in the present moment. And she said something like, the way to see this, or to see your childhood and start healing it, is not to be like, now that we are adults, we take responsibility for our healing and for our feelings in the now, but to also not feel bad for what happened basically as a child. So you could also go and say now, well, I've been responsible as a child as well. I could have healed something too. I could have maybe put up a boundary. I could have done this and that, but instead seeing ourselves as innocent and just accepting that this was the experience, and having the power and also the mindset now to take responsibility, because I feel for a child it's also quite hard to, we are so innocent, and I think there is a time where we are when we are born, I think the ego develops like kind of like later, or it starts to come up kind of later during the times. And in Laws of the Spirit World, it was also said that, for the first, I think the first year, you still are very deeply connected to, to heaven, basically, to the higher realms, where you could basically go back if you say like, oh, the parents I chose to ascend, basically, and for my lessons, it might be too hard for me, so I could still go back, kind of. So what I wanted to say with this is just like, I think as a child you might be so innocent and you are more connected to that. And it might feel like when you had a bad childhood or bad parents or something like this and very harsh experiences, it might have looked like the world is against you, or you are a victim, or you are bad, or you deserve that. Because we are so innocent, we don't really think like it's our stuff to heal, right? It's the lesson we chose. But as we grow older and finally and luckily we found the teachings that help us to heal our childhood and to have the adulthood that we truly deserve and desire, yeah, we can take responsibility for that and change it for the better.
That was beautiful. Yeah, I felt like it's a great relief when you realize your true parents is God, because then you can give the true responsibilities to your true parent instead of claiming your brothers and sister, your mother, sister, and your brother, father as your parent, and thinking that what they taught you was the true teachings and was the what will ground you into heaven, when really they're still learning from what they've learned, and they're still growing and doing the best that they can.
Yeah, thank you both. I think both of you made very valid points that really stood out for me. But I think one of the things that was my primary takeaway, and we know it, but it's good to be reminded of it, is that somebody cannot give you something that they're not able to give themselves. And it's like, every time, like when I feel into those words, I kind of get the like this goosey moment, this goosebumps moment, because it's just so real. Like we've experienced it so many times, and we've allowed ourselves to become resentful so many times. And often the fact of actually just let people off the hook for the things that you think they should have given you also allows you to let yourself off the hook, which means you can approach something from a much healthier perspective of, well, hey, I didn't know how to do it. And I didn't do it because I didn't know how to do it. But now that I do know how to do it, I can go ahead and do it. It's a very different approach to sitting in the upset versus realizing that you actually have a canvas in front of you that you can paint in a different way. And that probably is the most empowering feeling because you get to flavor it with you. You get to present it to yourself in a way that makes you feel more you. So it kind of takes out the messy color from the paintbrush, and you can kind of go, hey, I want this blue there, and so I'm going to put this blue there. And it just gives you so much more power in the process of realizing how whole and full and actually rather well developed you are. And sometimes we just kind of don't realize that about ourselves. So I truly appreciate that where I can let myself off the hook for something that I didn't know in the past, but that I do know now and that I can do now makes it so much better. And the thing that stands out to me is that I read a Maya Angelou quote ages ago that said, "Do the best you can until you know better, and when you know better, do better." And it's just like it just literally takes all the pressure off. And it just allows you to actually become a lot more present with what is happening as opposed to, oh, this didn't happen and that should have happened and woe is me and, subscribing to this tumbleweed philosophy that you're kind of blown all over the place. The fact of the matter is, you now are in a position where you are at power. And when you are at power, you can exercise your power and your energy in a much healthier way that also doesn't make you resent yourself for your past patterns and past behavior, but rather it gives you license to heal and present yourself in the way that you want to, in the way that you need to, in the way that feels best for you. So that was that was the key thing. And I know, like I expanded on it quite a bit, but like I actually feel passionate about just actually let other people off the hook because you're also letting yourself off the hook.
Yeah. I really appreciate the teachings of union because it completely shifts the way the society looks at children and parents and the way that it's more beneficial to look at your parents. Because for a long time, I always imagined that my parents would be my best friend. And after growing and going into full adulthood, not only did I, you know, move away from my best friend, feeling that we didn't resonate, but recognizing that my parents were not my best friend. Like God was my best friend. And I was able to have this friendship and trust with God that I could not have with my parents. And I thought that that was the highest relationship that one would have. So it actually makes me feel a lot more powerful that I can just connect to my heart and my best friend is guiding me. And it opens up a whole like door, or rather like the gates of heaven, recognizing how connected we are to heaven and are good, recognizing that God is our parent and God is always raising us and always guiding us, and that we get to learn from our parents and our parents get to learn from us.
Yeah, for sure.
I think. Mm.
Were you gonna say
You
something,
want to say something?
Carmen?
Yeah.
Dang, you're it.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to expand upon what you just said is an interesting point that Daniel and I recognize in our union, that as we heal our childhood and what's coming up, because of course we trigger each other and stuff, old parent wounds come up. So he's still living with his mom, and we recognized that we tend to project our parents, we tend to make them like our twin flame. We tend to treat them as if they are our twin flame, like not in the romantic way, but in everything you just said, for example, making them our best friend, or thinking they are our source of love, or I also thought at some point in my life when I was a teenager and I started healing like my own way, I was journaling a lot and feeling my feelings and getting in touch with that and choosing to heal. I always had this desire to heal and to expand and develop in life. And so I kind of had the expectation that my parents would do the same as I heal. But your parents are not your twin flame, so they won't necessarily make the same choices as you. And so it's safe to let them off the hook here as well, as we spoke about it already, and, release them and make space for your twin flame in that way. And also recognizing that our parents tend to, for most of us, I'd say, they tend to see us as their twin flame. Like Daniel is moving through this a lot, where he feels or felt like um he was put in that position where he, is responsible for his mother. I felt the same a lot of times, and where they see us as the one that you stick with for your whole life. And maybe that's also a cultural thing, because where he's coming from, it's basically normal to stay with your parents until you married and have children and share a whole house with everyone. It can be beautiful, I guess, when everyone is on the same page and healing, right? And it's your soul family. I'd say, it's possible. But for most of the cases at the moment, I would say it's not. And so, healing through that cultural thing as well, where you feel like, yeah, it's okay to release your parents. It's okay to not have that desire to be with them for the rest of your life, and share a house with them and all of that, because that's basically also not their role. And yeah, it gives a lot of freedom and relief in my heart, knowing as well, like, wow, I can let go. I can also free my parents energetically of that role, of that pressure to still have to maybe parent myself, or, be there for myself. It's a privilege to, I mean, I read somewhere once that it was for parents, and it basically said like it's a privilege for you as a parent when your child is already grown up, it's an adult, and they still want to have contact with you. It's a privilege, and they don't owe you that. And that's another thing that gave me a lot of relief, knowing like yeah, my parents did, their best to parent me, and I think they did a good job also in bringing up upsets for me to heal through. And oh, damn, I forgot my point. Mm, yeah, it's just relieving to know that I don't owe them anything for what they have done to me, because um it's a divinely it's a very divine role to be a parent. And every parent should feel this joy of giving to their child and not expecting anything in return, but actually they receive everything in return, because when you parent with God, parent in God, this is like the most divinely role you can have.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you know, just to echo what you shared, like also with us, I mean, it's a very similar thing where you almost start to assume responsibility for your parents. And I've been in the situation where I've had to say to my family that, you know, because like, you know, my mother will do something and then everybody will come to me and say, "But, you know, she did this and she did that, and you need to this and you need to that." And I'm like, I'm not the parent. I'm actually not the parent. This is a grown woman in her own right. And so if she chooses that behavior that's upsetting her or the people around her, that's on her. I can't be responsible for stopping somebody's choice, because as much as the choice may look wrong or bad on the outside, it's still their choice. And so it takes a lot of energy to free myself from that supposed responsibility of being responsible in their eyes for this woman that I grew up with, you know. And it's kind of changed my perspective that I don't have to get anxious or upset or concerned too much about what her behavior will bring into her life, because she's choosing that. And it's not my purpose to take away her choice. But it's also not my purpose to assume responsibility for things that are not my responsibility. I'm not her source. And I think that's very important, that we realize that our desire for all of these things often stems from projecting the image of source onto other people. And when we make other people our supposed source, we also give them the power to withhold those things. And that withholding of those things is what builds the resentment. And again, you know, it's something that Kanisha shared, that we don't learn a lot of, we hardly ever learn these things as we're growing up. We learn a whole lot of things, but this is not one of them. But and the nice thing is that as we get into our healing journey and we start to meet with spiritually grown up people, we learn the lesson. But it's on us to learn the lesson and to implement it. And in implementing the lesson, it's literally, God is your source. God may act through me sometimes, but not all the time. And I'm not taking God's space in your life. And I no longer expect you to take God's space in my life. And the minute I did that for myself, I was able to relax significantly more than I ever recall being relaxed, because it's not my responsibility. I can assist, I can guide, I can provide some energy where I'm called to do so in a loving way, but not to perpetually pour out my energy into situations that are not mine to choose, to act on, to resolve, or any of those things. And I have been able to free myself. I mean, it took a lot of energy just to start setting those boundaries, because I think I've, you know, like in most of my life, I just automatically, I'm the eldest. I have a younger sister. The eldest generally steps into that more responsible role. And that's what I did. And probably toiling under the misapprehension that I had to be responsible for everything. And the minute I was able to literally give God back his job, his or her job, I was able to relax. I was able to start doing my job, which is loving me in those hurt places.
Mm. Yeah, that was beautiful. Giving responsibility to those who are truly responsible and acknowledging that we don't owe our parents anything, even for raising us. I'm very grateful that they did raise me, but I don't owe them. One thing I wanted to mention was the meditation that was done. I was thinking of my childhood and thinking of an age that I was, that the meditation brought me back to. And I realized that I was such a joyful child. Like God just gave me a lot of joy. And I suppressed that joy and I was very much upset with the world and the divine masculine because I was brought up in a world where my parents taught me that it was a man's world and the women had to suffer. The women had to be submissive, and you're either valuable uh, as a wife or a mother. So knowing that, I suppressed a lot of joy because I thought that life was meant for suffering when truly it's not. So I'm glad I got out of that perspective, that thinking that our parents are going to be the ones to um, role model for us what it means to be true, you know, purified adults. And they took on a healing journey for themselves of purifying their consciousness. But to his their own, and you recognize what resonates with you. And that's not necessarily what might resonate with your parents or your brothers or sisters or anyone in society, aside from what resonates in your heart. Um,
Yeah, I agree with you. I also think something else that stood out for me quite a bit was where Ganesha shared around the concept of abandonment, and Jeff and Shaleia sharing in the book that you cannot be abandoned by somebody that has never claimed you. I think it's a very powerful realization because I also grew up with a single mother. And for me, it's always been it's like it always just felt like I've had kind of strained relationships with masculine figures. And I've always found really strong feminine figures in my life to befriend, to work with. It's just always been that way. And I got to the point where I was like, well, what is this? Because for me, I've always had this perception of my father abandoned me. And coming to the realization that, well, actually, I've never met the person. He never claimed me as his son in any way, shape, or form. And it's just so much more comfortable to actually realize that I can't possibly be abandoned in that space because there was no claiming. And in all honesty, it's much more powerful for me to have God as my father than somebody that was not, well, for all intents and purposes, was non-existent kind of thing. And I recall of the funniest thing, like I turned 21 and my mother had never ever had this conversation about my father with me. And then I turned 21 and she's like, do you want to meet him? And I was like, why? What's the purpose of this meeting? So, so obviously at the time she was like, well, you don't need to be arrogant about it. I was like, well, what's the point? Like, who is this person that you now want to introduce me to? what value is an introduction going to have in my life? So, it was like, and I think I was just always a very independent child because of the way that we grew up. I was made to be responsible quite early in my life. And so with that, I developed a strong sense of independence. And what then happened was I probably became a bit resentful where people got in the way of that independence. And so even in my conversations with my mother, it very quickly shifted from, well, you stay in your corner. This is my life now. So my sister always reminds me of these things where she would say to me, I wish I was like you, where you would just like, if this and if that and if that and if that. And I'm like, I don't actually remember that about myself. But like when I think back into it and I feel back into it, it was probably operating a lot from a place of hurt. So that super independence actually put me in the space where I didn't give people the opportunity to get into my life and to love me, even though I was wanting love. And so in later years, I then learned that super independence is actually a trauma response. And that's why I'm sharing it, so that because what then happens is because you've been hurt so much, you become so independent that nobody technically has the opportunity to hurt you again. But it has the caveat that it's also very self-isolating. And you don't realize that as you're growing up because you're thinking, well, I'm on my mission and I'm marching through this world to the beat of my own drum, except the drum is not playing a very comfortable song, and you're just not hearing that those drum beats are not a comfortable song. So I think it's very important for us to realize that a lot of things have dual purposes, and often those dual purposes also sometimes have negative connotations attached to it for the things that the thing that you don't want is actually the thing that you're attracting because you don't realize the pattern. And that's why I believe that the sermon from Ganesha was very well timed in just saying, you have to be aware, because when you're aware, you can reparent yourself in those places. And you don't have to be so independent that nobody can get close to you, that nobody can love you. Because literally, I was going through this world like, I don't need people, I don't need people. But the fact of the matter is, that's just very self-isolating. So a lot of the healing happened through my journey, through learning, through MAP as well. I've also done MAP around the abandonment issues that I was grappling with. But all of those things, I feel like we sometimes resent our experiences, but our experiences give us the wisdom to help other people heal. So again, when we put ourselves in the space of being the victim, we also then put ourselves in the space of not having had or made a choice. And yet, we have made that choice because that spiritual lesson is exceptionally powerful when you heal it. And it's exceptionally powerful to then be able to share so that other people can use it for their healing.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. There was something you said that really stuck with me. Again, it's this, we maybe all know those people, and I include myself in that. I always told myself when I was a child, like, I never want to become like my mother. I never want to become like her. And there are so many people, and there were so many people around me who also said, I never want to become like my dad. I never want to be like this and that. But as we grow older, you could see that every one of us was picking up these characteristics that they hated so much about their parents. And I
Yes.
noticed that within myself as well. And I was like, oh no, Jesus Christ, what's going on? And I'm so grateful that we have this we have this teaching, because ooh, yeah, it's sometimes a little like you know, to look at it and be like, and admit like, oh my goodness, I'm like my mother here. And that's exactly what I did want to become. But I have the power to change it. I have the power to attune to it. And that's interesting because, you know, something in my healing, what I also notice and what I'm moving through at the moment is a lot like upsets around work in general, how I see work and all these belief systems around it. And I was like, where is this coming from? Like, why do I have it even? And I noticed that that's something how my mother saw work and how she like you know, conveyed it to me and how she felt about work and how she felt about after work. And, you know, her whole life she does these things to avoid work as much as she could. And so I picked up on it, obviously. And of course, I also chose her on a spiritual perspective before even coming on earth to get this lesson, to really realize what's going on here. And something that has been said in the sermon as well is that we heal also our whole family trauma line, right? Because my mom received all her lessons basically, or yeah, her stuff from her childhood and so on. And that's like a whole family line. And so we can see like what we are healing and moving through is something that our whole family line has always been struggling with. And it's so empowering to know like it stops here. We are not going to give this and pass this on to our children and even to our brothers and sisters, right? We don't even need to become parents to pass this teaching on, to pass the healing on. And yeah, I think it's really empowering and to know like and sometimes be aware of like where is this coming from? Oh yeah, I picked this up from my mom. Or, you know, just realizing like, oh yeah, this is something I hated about my parents. I feel like that at the moment, but I can let go of that and it ends here and transcends for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to laugh with you because, one of the things that I often say is I was very much, I don't want to be like my mother. But then, at some point in my life, I opened my mouth and my mother was coming out. I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I really resonate with what both of you guys are saying because, like, if you look at the higher picture, the journey that you chose was picked and chosen with you and God so perfectly for your life purpose and for your twin flame. Um, Granville, what you were saying about the fear of intimacy, I also resonate with deeply. And that's something that I've learned because my parents are who my parents are. And I can not only overcome that and heal that, but I can be that person that is able to maintain deep intimacy. And that's a role I'm meant to play for God. And another aspect is learning not to be hyper independent. And that's also a role I can play for God. And like you were mentioning, teaching others about this. So I learned that my might and my will is so strong to live because of what I learned from childhood. So we can really take these as badges in our armor, knowing that we specialize in these things because of our childhood and our experiences with our parents. And really was like picked like, from a candy store exactly the types of chocolates and candies that we like. And I know we're talking about like healing and things that we have to heal, but that is also a juicy part of life, knowing that like we can overcome this in such beautiful ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's been, I think that's probably the power of being able to reparent yourself is that you get to remake it. You get to literally remake the very genetic imprint that has been carrying that pattern. And that is more powerful than anybody ever realizes that they are. Because often when these things are passed down, they're not always just passed down in behavior. They're passed down in collective family memories. They are passed down in your body's physiology, remembering certain physiologies because you are a conglomeration of previous physiologies. And so when we start to heal and those neural pathways remake themselves, we are remaking our DNA to the healthiest that we can possibly make it. And that is super bloody powerful if anybody ever doubted it. Because to be able to influence your DNA and future DNA in that way, but also to be able to contribute to healing in the collective in that way, remakes the DNA of humanity. That's bloody powerful stuff right
Definitely. Very, very powerful. It was a very important sermon to have, like very foundational to one's growth in this journey.
there. Awesome. Just checking in. How are you both feeling? I'm starting to feel like we're pretty much complete here.
Same, yeah.
Awesomeness. So thank you both for the conversation and for joining me for After Church Tea Time today. Thank you to the people that have been following us. Also, please feel free to like and subscribe to our Church of Union YouTube channel, where you will find all our previous content. And also, please feel free to share any questions in the chat. We will engage with you as those questions come through, or even if you just have insights that can contribute to the collective healing. So thank you, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you again soon for another After Church Tea Time.